Open meeting compliance statement.
I, the undersigned clerk of the Board of Education for the Alva Independent School District Number 1 of Woods County, Oklahoma, certify that prior to December 15th of the last calendar year, the date, time, and place of this regular meeting was filed in the office of the County Clerk of Woods County, Oklahoma. I also certify that at least 24 hours prior to this meeting, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, notice of the date, time, place, and agenda of this meeting was posted in prominent public view at the location of the meeting. Witness my hand this first day of April 2019.
Consent agenda. All the following items, which concern reports and items of a routine nature, normally approved by one board vote, unless any board member decides to have a separate vote or any on all of these items. The consent agenda consists of the discussion, consideration, and approval of the following items. 3.1, addition of items of new business to the agenda.
There are none.
3.2, minutes of the March 4th, 2019 regular board meeting. 3.3, approval of the financial report. Approval of the activity fund report. Approval of the activity fundraiser report. Approval of the activity fundraiser inter-account transfers. And approval of the child nutrition fund. Minutes?
Okay, I did not see any changes to the minutes from our March 4th board meeting. If you look at 3.3, the finance report, all investments are current and up to date. I wanted to inform the board that we received a notice from the State Department of a fund balance penalty of $142,000, and that's a result of our carryover from the previous few years. We were able to write a waiver, and that was granted at last week's state board meeting, so we will receive that funding. And basically what that amounts to is our last state aid allocation, so that is good news for our district. We look at the object code report that I shared with each of you, just a couple of additions to that. If you look at 640, or actually 344, you will notice an increase between this year and last year in our security services, is what that's titled. The result of that is our increase in our SRO with the additional time that we have at the elementary school. Number 643, you notice that on the object codes, that is titled State Adoption Textbook, and if you look at the comparison between this year and last, we adopted math textbook this year, so that's the reason for the increase. And then finally 654, coded furniture and fixtures. Those are just increases as a result of some new purchases of water fountains and bleachers that we've had throughout the summer. Activity fund report. I might mention before I get to the activity fund report, is our chargeables for the month. We have 4 different chargeable areas, and again, when you comparison from March of last year to March this year, we are up in revenue throughout all those 4 chargeable areas. But I would add that gross production has been down the last 2 months, around $68,000 to $80,000 each month. So that's something that we need to continue to be aware of. We usually get that gross production, which has been a main driver of what our budget is. We usually get that the second week of each month. And so what Terry Owen and myself plan to do is we're going to begin to look at our budget and our projected expenditures, and we'll have a little bit better idea at the beginning of June what that carryover is going to be. And maybe even close to May, we'll be able to have a better idea and report that to you where we'll be with our carryover. We look at 3.4, the activity fund report. No new changes to the activity fund. I might add, if you'll see some different totals in that, the reason for those, the distribution of concession stand money, and you'll see that a few minutes in the inter-account transfers. Mrs. Durkee has done an excellent job of going through those inter-account transfers, and what we tried to do is leave about $6,000 in our activity account for concession and startup money, trying to put more of that distribution back into those particular activities program accounts. 3.5, fundraisers. We have one fundraiser this month, and this is for cheerleading for this summer. And this is to help pay for the registration and the camp for our cheerleaders to attend that. 3.6. If we go through each one of these inter-account transfers, the first one is yearbook. The first two are really talking about the same thing. They're yearbook purchases made out of the Lincoln and Longfellow activity accounts. And part of the incentive or prizes during their fundraisers have been to purchase a yearbook for each student at the elementary school. And so that is the first two inter-account transfers that you see. The next is Alva High School track or football concession stand, and so there's a transfer for that for the middle school. The leadership organization at the middle school works in concession stand, and that money will go into the middle school activity account. Le Club, the Spanish club, made bureaux, and they purchased items out of the banquet account, and that is to reimburse those. And then finally, 3.7, the child nutrition report. You can see from the report, we are up in our service if you compare February 18 to February 2019 in our meals served, in our breakfast served, and a little bit down in our total lunches served. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? And if there are none, I would recommend that we approve the consent agenda.
I would make the motion that we approve 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, and 3.7 as presented.
Second.
McDermott?
Aye.
Parker?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Kane?
Yes.
Vote to approve purchase order encumbrances for the following funds for fiscal year 19. 4.1, general fund as presented. 4.2, building fund as presented. 4.3, child nutrition fund as presented. And 4.4, gift fund as presented.
Okay, if we look at 4.1, the general fund, number 11, just a few of the purchase orders that you will see with some of the larger expenses. Number 618 is Amazon corporate credit, and that is for district office supplies, purchases made for each school site. Purchase order number 623, water, sewer, and trash. We had an open PO for that to begin the year, and we hope that this $10,000 will get us through the remainder of the fiscal year into June. Number 634, STS Education. That is some professional development that we provided our teachers. You can see it's $4,000, and that is on-site professional development for the new active panels that we purchased this year, and we will be reimbursed through federal funds for that professional development. Number 639 is Peak Environment, and that is the spraying for all school sites. 650, we have had some work. You see a couple of purchase orders to R&T diesel repair. Purchase order number 644 for over $1,000, $1,025.40. We had an alternator go down on a bus at Newcastle, and so we had to go down there and do some work on it. And then purchase order number 650 to R&T diesel. That was to work on a heater and a door on one of our older activity buses. Purchase order number 651, Voco Vision. That is to put more money into that contracted service for psychological testing, which is a part of our special education requirements. Look at 4.2 Building Fund, number 21. We have one purchase order out of there this month. That is number 59 to Integrity for $1,000, and that was to repair the sidewalk at Washington. When we did our snow removal, there was a mishap on the sidewalk, and we had to go back and do some repairs with that to get that fixed for our after-school bus load. And there are no funds that have been purchased or moved in 4.3 or 4.4, our child nutrition or gift fund. Are there any questions? If there are none, I would recommend that we approve purchase orders for 4.1 and 4.2.
Make a motion, we approve 4.1 and 4.2.
Second.
McDermott,
Aye.
Parker,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kane.
Yes.
Superintendent's report?
Okay, we have a few resignations to report tonight. Ashley Bounds, Jennifer Filson, and Teresa Lloyd have turned in their resignations for the school year, and we thank those three for what they've done for our students. And then also, Mary Green will be retiring as high school librarian, and we appreciate the years of service that Ms. Green has provided our students at Alva High School. 5.2, is communication for you. Just might let you know that in the coming weeks, we are looking at some roof repair at some different sites, Lincoln, Longfellow, and Alva High School. So we will be looking at putting those out to bid and meeting with insurance. We are also in the process of purchasing or looking at purchasing a new activity bus, and that was something we budgeted for back last July, and we are beginning to look for what's going to fit us and what will be good for our students. Talk a little bit about legislative updates. 5.3, there is a tremendous amount of legislation to do with education at this point. Just a couple of things that you might note tonight. There is a bill that is still in committee for a $1,200 teacher pay increase. There is another bill, House Bill 2470, that they're looking at offering teachers $300 instead of taking, as the flex benefit, instead of taking the insurance. And so offering some tax credit to teachers to purchase school supplies, House Bill 2502. And then Senate Bill 362 is kind of a big bill that will affect education funding throughout the state because it changes the funding formula. And not quite sure the implication for schools, but what it will do will change student weights. And so I think I've talked to you before about students are weighted at different levels for different grades. And students also receive weights for special education, economically disadvantaged, so on and so forth. And so there's some talk about changing that formula. And so that is something we'll need to make sure that we're aware of. We've said it before, Oklahoma has one of the most equitable formulas in the nation, and I'm not sure that we necessarily want to change in the formula because we don't know the implications until you start funding it. And so that's something we're going to need to be aware of. And that is all I have.
Principal.
Well, hi. How are y'all? I brought some people with me.
Yeah, a few. Oh my gosh. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, so this is just, we're going to start talking about special ed, which is my passion. So I get to talk about it tonight. So go ahead and we'll get started. And for the agenda, we're just going to show you who the Alva special educators are for Alva. Then we're going to talk about what's going on in Alva. We're going to talk a little bit about academic behavior triangle, the tier 3 interventions, iReady, which is our assessment and diagnostic tool that we use for our kiddos, and our 3 and 4-year-olds. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Tracy Wynn wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'm going to do her part, but she participated, and so did I, and so did Mrs. Argo last year in an internship at the Oklahoma Autism Center, which really changed the way I thought. And then Brandy's going to go ahead and go over some interactive activities that we do with our 3s and 4s. If you want to go to a happy place, come to our 3s and 4s, and then you'll just get happy, I'm just saying. And then PECS, Hattie's going to talk about PECS for a little bit, and we'll describe all of this. The next thing that we're going to do is talk about the Arenal Foundation Grant, year 1, Arenal Foundation Grant, year 2, and then we're going to wrap it up. So the first thing is we're going to talk about our special educators. This is our Washington people, Brandy Peace and Tracy Wynn. Longfellow is Marissa Whiteley, and Lincoln is Morgan Nice Longer. AMS, we've got Kelly Kilman, Chesney Thomas, and then of course Dalton Beeler didn't even know he was going to be on the screen tonight. So he's one of our special educators at the high school along with Marcus Mead. We are fortunate in our district to have 3 speech-language pathologists. They bring such a depth of knowledge to our team and they strengthen it. And we have Becky Houston, who's going to be talking a little bit later about the autism assessment. And we've got Hattie Potter and Julie Wren. Misty didn't know she was going to be highlighted tonight either, but she's one of our psychometrists that helps us with testing, and Dawn Hill helps us with testing. You didn't even know you were going to be highlighted, did you? And then also our school psychologist who comes to us via Georgia, the computer. So when she sent me her picture, I was like, this doesn't even look like you anymore, because she has dark hair now, but that's the one she wanted to present tonight. So
She's incognito.
yeah, she's incognito. And then finally, so that's us. Our physical therapist is Jan Eden, and then Darby has served our kids for quite some time. And then our occupational therapist is Janet Hickman, so that's us. That's the special ed folk. What's going on in Alva? We really use both sides of this triangle. Special education lives in that red part. That's really where we live. And we're getting better at Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions now, and we got some other stuff going on. So if you want to go ahead, I just wanted to show you that this is the expectation of the state, that we look at both behavior and academic. We are Tier 3, that's what we do. And as of October 1, we served 16% of our student population in special education services, implementing Tier 3 interventions. We're over that 5 to 10%, we are. But I believe as we get closer and stronger in our interventions in Tier 1 and Tier 2, automatically our Tier 3 gets cleaned up a little bit better. So I'm hoping that we're closer to those numbers. Also, iReady is what we do, and I'm just going to pass it to you, and you can take one and pass it around. This just allows us to write IEP goals specifically tailored for that student, K-12. It allows progress monitoring to make sure that what we're doing is working. And then it also allows student practice target goals, which, like I've shown this before, and I didn't want to beat a dead horse or anything, but it had a game-like computer environment, so they get to keep coins and they get to work for things that are really cool. So that's our assessment in Tier 3. Our 3 and 4-year-old program, in strategic planning, there was one thing that had come up that, I don't think people know how we serve our 3 and 4s anymore, since the co-op has been, we're not a part of the co-op anymore. And so previously, that's how we served them, but now we serve them at Washington. And so I will talk about the Oklahoma Autism Center internship, and then Brandy's going to talk about some of the activities we use with our 3s and 4s, and I'm telling you guys, if you want some happiness in your life, just go to that classroom. You'll get plenty of happiness. And then Hattie Potter again will talk about our PECs. And so Tracy Wynn, the curriculum that we use, or that we attend to, we got from the Oklahoma Autism Center. You wouldn't think that we're working on setting, or that we're working for imitation, but that's really where we start. We want our 3s and our 4s to be able to imitate, to be able to sit and do circle time appropriately, to be able to follow directions, like, go pick up your toys and things like that. And so this is what we use as a guide to help us facilitate all of that. We also learned, and Mrs. Argo also got to participate in this, Discreet Trials, which that's just a data sheet that we use. If a person is working on saying imitation, we practice and practice and practice that skill, and we keep track of the data on whether or not it was prompted heavily or if it was a little bit of prompt. And so then we can see if we're moving toward them actually imitating the way they need to imitate. Okay, I'm just using imitating because that's what we did this morning. I had to go down to 3 and 4-year-olds and we imitated. So Positive interventions, and of course this is going to be talked about all the rest of the night. I brought one that's been loved and used. We also learned positive behavior interventions with token supports. If you are specifically, let's say that a student is specifically working on sitting at circle time, and let's say that they can only do it for 5 minutes, well, they need to be reinforced to get that behavior in every 50% of that time, which is every 2.5 minutes. So we use this to keep track, and we get them sitting the way they need to. So our pictorial supports, we're also going to talk about that. Mrs. Argo's going to talk more about this, but this is just telling students where they go next. This is just using, this is where I'm going to go next, and it keeps things going a lot quicker. Okay, Brittany.
She is not kidding.
you
3
gotta
and
be
4-year-olds are the happiest time of the day. Not
Yes.
even joking. Like, if you want happiness, come to my classroom between 8 and about 9:30. So it is amazing. You can't even look at it without being happy.
There
So
you go.
I do a lot of learning through nursery rhymes. So I'm just gonna I'm just gonna throw my stuff all over the place.
That's okay.
So we are learning to count, we're learning to sit, we're learning colors and shapes and sizes, and, as in like bigs and little, and identifying who our friends are. So one of our activities is 5 Little Frogs. So I'm just going to go like some of the things I've done with them. So we did the 5 Little Speckled Frogs, and they have 5 logs, and we take one away, so they're learning to count. After we have done 5 Little Frogs, we watch, they love videos, so we watch like a 2-minute video on the 5 Little Frog song. This happens, it's during our circle time. It started out with about 1 minute, because 3-year-olds can't sit. So we did 1 minute, now we're up to between 5 and 7 minutes per activity. They have their own little circles, and they sit on their circle, they do the activity, we do the board, we ask questions, they answer them. When we did frogs, we also had 5 Little Speckled Frogs t-shirts. We went outside to our log, and they practiced sitting on the log and jumping off the log. They loved it. So that was one of our nursery rhyme activities. Again, in circle time, they're learning to sit, identify colors, shapes, letters. We're learning each other's names, and most of these students don't have very many words, so for them to say frog or them to say green is a really big deal. So some of the other literacy activities, I'm going to jump down and skip some of it because I have a lot here, is we talk about stories. So they were just listening to the rhyme and learning the rhyme. So then we go through, look at my stuff. We go through our book, and everybody's heard this. I have a caterpillar that actually goes with it, a big stuffed caterpillar. And we go through and we talk about, what happened first. We talk about the counting of the objects in the book, and then they have like little apples, and they get to feed the caterpillar the apple. They feed them, and as they go through, they count. So this would be one day's activity. The next day, we would use our flip board, and they have to put the activities in order. And they love the felt board, so anything we can do with that is just amazing. Then the next day, we will do another caterpillar book, but this time they're putting in numbers. And then they only come 4 days a week, so then on the 4th day, these don't have backs on them yet, they have to put in order, like, he ate the watermelon, he ate the apple, and all the fruit that goes through it. So they are learning to identify different objects along with their numbers and their colors and things like that. So this is why it's the happiest time of the day. Our table practice time which would be our academics. So each child has their own skill list of things that they are working on, and none of them are the same. So there's 2 teachers, and then usually 1 extra person that comes in, a pair of some sort. Yeah, usually Mrs. Lovelace. And
This morning.
thanks, because I have a head start. So then we come in, we sit at the table, and there's about 4 children in the room with us at a time. So it's pretty much 1-to-1. And we go through fine motor skills, gross motor skills, and then we are far enough into the year that, like I said, they're sitting and they're attending. We are starting to learn to write our names. And prepare them they only come 30 minutes a day, but prepare them to be in school all day long. So that goes down to our transitions. We transition them from the office with their parents, which is a really hard thing for 3-year-olds to do, is to leave moms or dads. So we transition coming down the hallway, walking, which line to walk on because we have those awesome lines in our building. So they walk down the hall. Sometimes depending if the child is able to transition, some of my teacher friends hear lots of noises in the hall. We use a wagon to transition our kids from the office to the classroom. We use these swivel chairs in transition the children down the hallway, whatever makes it the easiest on the child. So those are some of our transitions back and forth to places. We work on transitioning to speech and from speech. And then finally, I get to go to Head Start every morning for about 30 minutes, and I see students up there who are still in our 3s and 4s. And I work on basically the exact same activities with them that I do at school. We're working on sitting, attending, involvement with other children, and preparing the students to come into pre-K next year. So that's a little bit of what I do. It's amazing. Again, if you guys want to come be happy, come join us in the mornings. That's all I have. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, I know you guys have heard a lot about PECs, but I have some stuff to share with you I think you probably haven't seen before, and then I actually have some awesome parents that gave permission that we can watch some videos. So PECs is a picture exchange communication system. It's just kind of an alternative to communication, goes right along with, it's to supplement language, to supplement speech. We never want to take the place of speech. PECs was designed for students with autism that were the preschool age, but has since been transferred to all ages and all different cognitive, physical, and communication challenges. The primary goal of PECs is just to teach functional communication. These are kids who, you'll see in some of the videos, they do have language, they do have some sounds, but if you don't know the context, it's not always intelligible, and some of them, because of PECs, you've been able to understand them more. Just to throw this in there, it was developed in 1985 by Andy Bondi and Lori Frost. It has a very specific prompting strategies and reinforcement strategies. It takes 2 people. We have a physical prompter who literally does not say anything. They just sit there and then they'll do hand over hand with a student. And then we have the communication partner, which is the person who immediately gives a reinforcer once they receive a picture, and they're the ones that does the talking. So if you get a picture that says cow, immediately it's cow, and you'll see a video of that here in a minute. It has a very specific error correction procedure. Depending on the type of error, we have to correct that way just to help teach it. And then, again, verbal prompts are not used, and that's just to build independent speech. So there are 6 phases that we use in PECs. The first is phase 1. It's how to communicate. So they learn to communicate by exchanging a picture for whatever they want. It's the highly preferred item, so it's always really fun. It's bubbles or candy or something that they really want. They just hand over the picture and immediately get reinforced. And I have a video of phase 1, but I'm going to explain phase 2 because it's literally the exact same thing. They just learned across a distance, or if your back's to them, you want them to come tap you on the shoulder and hand you the picture, just to build some persistence. So I have a video for you, and hopefully it plays. And 1, 2, 3, my turn. Ow, it's not eating.
text. Yeah, you can go text.
Okay. Okay, so that was phase 1, but phase 2 is literally the same thing. They just have to cross a distance to get what they want. Phase 3 is where we introduce 2 things at the same time, and it's more of a discrimination. And you start with a very highly preferred item, and then something they absolutely do not want, like a dirty sock. And they'll hand you the picture. You want them to hand a picture for their preferred item. But if they don't, if they hand you a picture for a sock, you give them the sock, and then you error correct, because they're not going to want the sock. And so you just error correct from there until they get it right. That's how we teach to the highly preferred items. So up until this point, they don't even really know what picture they're looking at. Phase 4 is sentence structure. It's where they start using the sentence strip, which is this little piece down here on bottom, and then they start adding I want to the sentence strip, and then they can say I want whatever their highly preferred item is. So we're going from single picture to discrimination to now I want. And then attributes and language expansion goes right along with the sentence strip that I want. You just, they start requesting a color. So if they want a red ball, they will put red. So I want red ball. And then the goal is that they'll peel the sentence strip off, hand it to the communication partner, and then the communication partner will read, I want red ball. So this next video I'm going to show you, I have to kind of lead into it for a second. This student, we had a red Skittle out, and red was not on, or I changed out the red Skittle for an orange. He ate the red Skittle, but we didn't have orange on top. So the physical prompter wasn't really sure what he was doing, so she tries to stop him. So you'll see that, but I get really excited, so I'm sorry about the excitement at the end. So he was even trying to say it along, when he handed it over, he was trying to say, I want red Skittle, but it was orange. So anyway, that was really exciting because that was the first time he had done it with an attribute. So phase 5 is the next step, and it is just responsive requesting. So this is at the point where they come into the therapy room or we're in the classroom and we say, okay, what do you want? And so they're able to tell us, I want puzzles, or it's not as set up and structured. It's more free for them to choose amongst all the things they like. And then phase 6 is the very last phase of PECS, and it is the commenting phase. And to me, this is one of the hardest phases to teach because they go from their most highly preferred item, I want, to I have to smell something now, I smell oranges. They don't want to do that as badly. But we had one child who absolutely blew through PECS, so I had our last video of him doing IC.
Okay, tell me what you see. some good too.
Okay, so this is his textbook. I mean, he has tons of stuff, and every time I go in to see him, I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to add more pictures. But he has center time, he has his numbers, letters, things that he likes and shapes, weather, they do weather in class, animals. This was actually what you guys were watching, the book for Brown Bear. And then we did textures. We worked on textures with him for I Feel. That was one of the things I was trying to get him to do, and he wasn't too interested in it. But he is so good at this. It's awesome. And then colors. And then we were doing I Smell and his snacks and drinks and stuff. So this is his book. It's absolutely incredible how awesome that they all are doing with text. And then my next slide is just kind of what's next. Some kids, as you can see with that one we just watched, his speech was actually getting really good. So some learners just graduate from text straight into speech. And then others can transition from text into a speech generating device. And actually some will stay in text. So it's just easier, they get used to it, and they do very well with it. So that's it with text.
So when you give a kid communication, you save their life. You really save their life because they can communicate their wants and their needs if they're able to tell you what they need, and tell you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Arenal Foundation grant in 2017 and 18, year one. We were one of 3 schools chosen to participate promoting positive inclusionary practices. That's one thing that I think we do well in Alva is inclusion. Actually, the Alva Review Courier did an article, or reran an article, and I wanted you guys to make sure you get one of those. They were trained in challenging behaviors, foundation aspects of PBIS, people first language, where you say a student, I always say students that receive special education services instead of SPED students. So that's people first language, autism characteristics, and then we also, for free, because of the grant, we got our assessment team training. We actually got trained in the ADOS, which is the Cadillac version of how we determine whether or not a student has autism. And so Becky's going to talk about that. So I don't know what happened to her. What happened to hers? Keep going and just see what's happening. There it is. I know it was me.
Okay, well first of all, I know we've talked about autism a lot, but just a reminder, what is autism? It's a lifelong developmental disability, and it's characterized by deficits in social communication and restrictive repetitive behaviors. The incidence is increasing. It's now 1 in 59. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, it was 1 in 68, like a year ago. It's 4 times more likely to occur in boys. And when we put the incidence, it's more common than pediatric cancer, diabetes, and AIDS combined in children. So it's incredible how it's growing. We find autism distributed throughout all races, nationalities, and social classes. And we can see symptoms from very mild to severe, nonverbal, with lots of behaviors. IDEA, our federal law that enables special ed. This is how it defines autism, a developmental disability affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction, generally before the age of 3. And other characteristics with autism that we frequently see are stereotype movements, repetitive behaviors, and resistance to environmental change in daily routines or unusual responses to sensory experiences. And we see all of those in our kiddos, fortunately. So, because autism is so important, the most important thing we can do is early intervention and identify it. So research has even demonstrated that high-quality early intervention can improve learning, communication, and social skills and underlying brain development. So we can even make a change in brain if we can identify, the neural pathways, if we can start early enough. So we are fortunate enough that our district has gotten the ADOS course and trained 4 of our staff in order to administer it. And another thing about the ADOS, or diagnosis. Often, children are, 42% of kids are diagnosed by the age of 4. However, developmental delays are noted in 85% of those kids by the age of 3. But there's a delay in getting diagnosis, so we're not getting intervention as early. So when we get involved and find some good ways to diagnose, it's great. So that, sorry, that is our ADOS, that is our kit, autistic, and it has all of those items. And we use all of those items in structured ways for each of these modules to give it. So it's considered a standardized assessment. We have normative data that we can use to compare with our children. It's considered the gold standard. So we really, previously we did checklists and
And then the Arenal grant actually paid for us to be trained in it. So part of that grant again, was allowing us to be able to be trained in this.
so we're looking at,
Provide the best services.
we evaluate communication, social interaction, and play through this, and we can give it from age 12 months to adulthood. And it is just one piece of a diagnostic assessment, though. We're still looking at cognitive, communication, adaptive behavior, and checklists. We're kind of looking at parents' observation and teacher observation. So it's just one part. We're still doing all this other information, so we get the complete picture of a kiddo. Now you can change it. So we have, the ADOS has 5 different modules, and it's divided on different developmental and language abilities. So it's kind of a toddler, less than 30 months, pre-verbal, phrase speech where a child doesn't have complete sentences, fluent speech up to about 13, 14, and then fluent speech is adolescent, adult. And the ADOS is what's interesting about it. We have all these toys. They're not all toys, but a lot of it's toys that we're using in systematic ways to look at children's behaviors. So we have a hierarchy of structures that we use. They're called presses in this test, and we do it the same way every time. So we can compare to other children. So we have a systemized way, and we're looking at their behaviors in response to these activities or scenarios we set up. So for us, it requires multiple practice. I'm looking at Hattie because we give it together to ensure standardized administration. We video it, and our psychologist, Jennifer, is also presently in the room. She's observing distantly. And then we code all these behaviors that we see. We're looking at language and communication, reciprocal social interaction, play, stereotype behaviors, and restricted interests. You know, where we say spinning, or we say hand flapping, you know, any of those behaviors we might see, and other abnormal behaviors. We code each behavior from 0 to 3, 0 being neurotypical behavior, 3 being abnormal, and then we get an overall score, and we use that to compare it to developmental norms, and we can get a kind of a comparison score for children with autism, and it also gives us a severity level. So we get a lot of information. Next. So I just want to talk about one of the modules. This is the module that we just gave last week for our youngest little ones, a 3-year-old. So these are the activities we do. We have free play. We just set up tables, toys on the table, toys on the floor, and it's kind of a non-structured environment where the child can get comfortable. And we're looking at his play and how he interacts, and during that time we can see if he responds to his name, if we get eye contact with the examiner. And one of the things we're also looking at is how he responds to his name. And we do up to 4 presses to try to get them to respond to their name. And if they still don't respond, then the parent try to get them to respond, or use things at home that they get them to respond. Respond to joint attention. And that's what this is. Oops. So as we have stuff going on in our room, we have this little activity covered up, and we discreetly take off the blanket at some point. And we don't point it out at first. We say, Samuel, look, and we try to gently get the child's attention. Samuel, look, and we shift our eye gaze to see if they can shift eye gaze. Samuel, look. And we do that up to 4 times, okay? And on the 4th time, we actually use a whole pointing response. Samuel, look, and we'll try to totally shift. So we're looking at and at that point, when they finally look, we activate the toy, which the kids love. And then they're very excited and want more. So we're looking at how they respond to attention, joint attention. Often they'll look at you like, do that again, you know. Up to 4 times, but we wait until we get their attention, until we activate the toy. And then they just want more and more and more. Bubble play, we have a bubble blower. We're looking at joint attention, requesting more, how they're requesting more. Are they looking at visually, are they verbalizing? Sometimes they'll try to do it themselves because they don't want to communicate. Anticipation of a routine. In this task, we may have something as simple as this. And we blow it across the room. And they love it. They go chase it, and we're hoping they'll bring it back to us and requesting. Okay? That's with the social routine. Responsive smile. When they smile at an adult or smile at their parent in response to an activity. Anticipation of a social routine. I'm going to tickle you. And there's a certain number of presses how we do that. Are they anticipating more? Are they excited? Do they come back for more? Functional and symbolic imitation. We're looking for them to actually use an object to demonstrate how it works. We have a frog, a car, a flower. And then hopefully we can use a placeholder and they can demonstrate understanding of that with, it's a block. Smell this. So a birthday party. We have a little activity we start with a birthday party, Play-Doh cake, we put candles in, and snack. We have snacks in really tight containers. They get one, and then we hold them here. Which one do you want? So they have to request. If they get super frustrated, we'll let them have one, but we're looking for them to request one or the other. And we try to use highly preferred items, find out what they like beforehand. So it has been very fun to get this test. So, any questions?
All right, so now we're on year 2. We got the Arenal Foundation grants this year. Can we say yay?
Yay.
We were the only school chosen in the state to participate.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So the 2 objectives that we were working for is the development of district-level autism behavior team, and then also programming for specific students who have autism, which we'll talk about that in a minute. So we did. Guess what? We did develop district-level autism and behavior teams, and so we want them to function in collaboration with teachers and administration to develop targeted behavior interventions for students that allow the students to access the regular ed curriculum. Okay, so we want those behaviors. Yeah, it's awesome. And then each site has a behavior team. I wanted you guys to be, these are our each site. At each site. We have a behavior team now at each site. I just brought Washington with me, their behavior team, but Misty is on the high school and Mr. Beeler is on the high school team as well. And Mrs. Tucker has been to a lot of the trainings that we had, so it's been super exciting. We've received training in steps to creating a team, communication strategies, and that was what we're going to do. So we can go ahead and go on to Washington, Mr. Whaley, if you wanted to. And then, so this is our behavior team at Washington. Ruth Cole is the facilitator. Yay, Ruth Cole. Krista Starbuck is the assistant facilitator. April Argo is a developer. Tiffany Mata is a developer. Tracy Wynn is a recorder, timekeeper, and developer. Brandy Peace is a developer and referral point person, and then Kayla Gilchrist is a recorder, timekeeper, and developer. So we're going to get started with what we were dealing with several referrals, and so we split the Washington team up into 2 teams, and that's the 2 teams that are represented. So now we're going to hear from Kayla.
Cheers.
So following our training, we came back to Washington and we established some norms, just focused on time, how we were going to listen to the teachers that were referring, confidentiality, decision-making, participation, and expectations. We also decided on our roles, which were just presented. After a student is referred to us, we have to start a process. There's some paperwork that we have the teachers start by filling out a referral form, which talks about the behavior, where it's happening, when it happens the most, the least, the motivation assessment, and the ABC chart, which Mrs. Starbuck is going to talk about in a minute. And then after that is filled out, then Mrs. Peace takes those referrals. And so the process starts with the teacher, and we start meeting as a team with the teacher. After the referral, we start observations. These are not evaluative. We're very supportive. We're trying to help that teacher. We are observing the student and the behaviors. And we're going to use that observation and as many as we can get with those forms that the teachers filled out. And we're going to meet and come up with a strategy, or many strategies, to support that teacher. After those are put in place, we do have some questions that we're asking ourselves just to make sure we're keeping up with the teacher, keeping an open conversation with the teacher, and the teachers can come ask us questions at any time if they have a question about the plan or any of the interventions that are being done. So.
Now, Tiff's going to talk about how we talk to teachers.
Anyone else need to go take a bathroom break? Okay. So the ultimate goal for our behavior team is to ensure that our students are successful academically and behaviorally. And in the early stage, we really focused on productive and appropriate communication. So our next slide shows the main focuses that we have been working on: asking open-ended questions, reflective listening, summarizing, using words of affirmation, and just providing motivational statements to support fluid change. Thank you. You're doing a great job. You're fantastic. Great job. You will notice in the comic they are checking for everyone's communication skills. And the first question was, are you a good listener? And of course the man looked at the camera and said, what? But I've noticed you guys don't do that here, so you guys are doing a fantastic job. When we ask open-ended questions, it just allows for a deeper understanding of the conversation and possibly new insight that we are unaware of. An example of productive open-ended questions are, could you tell us what's going well in your classroom, instead of, where's your visual support? It's kind of stupid that you don't have one, and that's probably why you're having all of your behavior issues, but don't worry, none of our district teachers. Listening reflectively allows listeners to just have an opportunity to seek to understand and then confirm that the speaker's ideas are being understood correctly. I can attest that I began as an average reflective listener, and now I am a productive active listener, so making gains. And this just helps build empathy throughout our building and our coworkers. Affirmation, words of affirmations are just statements that we use to recognize our teachers' strengths, success, and just efforts to change. What we've noticed is it's all just a mindset. If we're not ready to change, if we're not willing to change, then the change could be a struggle all the way around. And I would like to affirm that with all of the obstacles you guys are facing right now, that it's really impressive that you have sat and used your reflective listening during our presentations. We really appreciate it. When we summarize, we are just making sure that we're verifying what we're communicating with each other and just that we understand what we're trying to communicate and use the highlights of the conversation to make sure that we are productive and moving forward. Providing statements of motivational change is associated with success. So using positive forward moving communication will help positive forward moving actions in our classroom and in our schools. So a question to elicit change would be, what would you like to see differently about your situation? Do you think anything in your situation needs to change? Pretty short and sweet. Thank you for having me. Ayla talked about just the process of the team and how it began. I talked about communication, and I just want to reaffirm you guys did a fantastic job here. And now, Ms. Cole is going to talk about understanding the behavior that we're seeing in the classroom.
Good job. Good job. Behavior is, I think, the core of why we have this team, and it's why we're called to action, because usually there's behavior that's undesired and kind of disrupting the goals in a classroom, and we get burnout of what to do. And so that's the purpose of this team, is to collaborate, support, and fix it. And if we understand that behavior is a form of communication, if there's a reason behind a behavior, then we can start to analyze that behavior and figure it out, prevent it, help it, and respond to it in a productive way instead of like, stop doing that. So a lot of these referrals are like paperwork process helps us to see, like really pinpoint the behavior. Tara taught us really well about how to look at behavior and not to label it as like a tantrum, but to be very specific of what the characteristics of that behavior is, so that we can measure it better, and we can kind of backtrack and see what the environment is around it. I think that was the last one, but we're coming. So sometimes we're really hot or really uncomfortable, or we need something that we don't have, or we don't even understand that we need. The child in the tank top that was doing brown bear, his mother puts him in a lot of clothes in the winter, and so he's really hot by the time he gets there. And so for a few months he was in a tank top, because as soon as he got to school he figured out that he was too hot, and so he would communicate shirt off, jacket off, and then he could function way better. So oftentimes it's really simple, but it's hard to get there when we don't communicate the same language or in the same ways. Okay. So we look at the environment a lot, because whatever the environment is, the factors in it, that's supporting behavior, including the behavior we don't want. And so if we look at what's happening before the behavior happens or after it, are we fed, or have we slept well? Those human needs often need to be met first, and whether we have access to those needs or not, if we can't communicate that we're hungry, it's really hard to do anything else. And so seeing the behavior as a function and helping the communication be a replacement is helping us make a difference. And we can do this with things like predictable routines, visual routines. If I don't have words and I don't really understand your words, when you tell me like 1 more minute or we're going to go to PE soon, I have no idea what's going on. But if you show me a picture of Mrs. Murrow in the gym, okay, I'm with you, and I can regulate again and feel less anxious about kind of this chaotic environment of a classroom. When things are visual and they're posted and they're practiced and consistent, I can expect my environment. I can understand it to be safe and a place where I can do what I'm expected to do. And we can use all these things in an inclusive way. So just because I throw tantrums a lot doesn't mean that I have to leave the classroom a lot. It means that my classroom can be a place where I am using these tools to re-regulate and meet my goals. So for example, in my classroom, there's a visual schedule, and we take it down every time we do something for a specific student. So I can even have another student bring the lunch bag picture to my student, and it's part of our community. It's like part of our community. So it's not just for him, it's for all of us to function together. Because even if I have all my words, sometimes it's helpful to have a visual to remind me of what is actually going on.
This is our form that we use when we get together to identify behaviors. And we all know that behavior is learned, but what's really important is we need to know that with the proper reinforcements, we can change behavior. So what we do is we need to think of the positive opposite of what we want to happen. So if a kid in the classroom is blurting out the answers and we don't want him to do that, then we reinforce him raising his hand. So we reinforce what we want to happen in the classroom. Another thing that's really important when we look at this form is we need to describe behaviors in objective ways. We need to make sure that our emotional factors don't come into play when we do this, and sometimes that's really hard, but we need to be objective as a team and look at all the behaviors so that we can make a good decision and a plan for that teacher. So let's look at this video and see if we can describe these behaviors. Not that one, but this one. So, as Ms. Cole said, we wouldn't say he's throwing a temper tantrum, but what we would say is he threw himself down on the floor, he grabbed at his head, or we just described in explicit terms what he was doing. So this form, back up.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. On this form, you'll look and see that there, at the top of the page, there are three things that we look at. We call them the ABCs. Antecedent is what happens before the behavior. Behavior is the behavior. We describe that in explicit terms. And the consequence is what happens right after the behavior, good or bad. So there usually are two different functions for someone throwing a behavior. It's either to gain something or to escape from something. So after looking at this video, what would you say the function of the behavior would have been?
To gain something.
What would you say? Gaining.
Attention.
His mother's
It can be an honorary member.
I like my household.
Very sensitive, right?
We might resemble that, huh? Good job, Krista.
Okay, once we determine the function of the behavior from the form that she just went over, then we look at these 6 domains to develop an intervention or a plan for that student. And one of the main ones is an environmental change, and that can just be changing up the space for that student, giving them a space to go to where they can take a break, or if they're feeling, I have an anger scale here somewhere. We can show the anger scale, and they can tell us how they're feeling, where they are on the scale, and they can take a break. In my classroom, I had to make one in the back of the room where it's more of a private area where that student could go. It's just got a bean bag and some emoji pillows, and they would just go take a break. And sometimes they were back there for a minute. Sometimes he would fall asleep for an hour and a half. It just depended on what he needed for that time. So that's kind of environmental changes. And then we do visual supports. And they talked about a visual schedule. And it's different for each child. This one is one we've been working on right now. It's very used, as you can see. And it's a modified schedule for the student right now to be successful in school right now, to keep him in school. And he just changes teachers throughout the day and does different tasks in those classrooms. So he carries that, he finishes that person, moves that person, he moves it down because he finished it. So that's his visual schedule. We do first then charts. If they're having trouble doing a task, we say first you do your station, then you can do they change the picture to iPad or computer, whatever their interests are. So we use those also. And we use reinforcer boards, star boards. Mrs. Lovelace had one a minute ago. This is one I've used in my classroom. Yes, Mr. Feely uses one. We use stars, and like when I first started with my students, we worked up to 2 stars. There were not 5 stars, and then we gradually work up to doing, maybe it's 5 questions on a paper or whatever the task is then. So we just kind of work up to getting those things accomplished. And schedule cards. Mrs. Mata had a student a couple years ago, and he would just go out to the playground, and he just couldn't figure out what to do on the playground. He was just lost. walking around, wandering around, so she made recess cards of everything on the playground so they could choose and kind of have a direction of where to go. So those are some of the things we use for those strategies. And communication to the student. When you're communicating with a student for directions, they need to be short, direct, and to the point. Less is better. Adding a visual or a prompt to communication is important also, like we've been talking about, and providing choices. It can just be the simplest of, do you want to do 3 questions right now or 4? Do you want to use a pencil to write with or a crayon? Just giving them choices when it doesn't matter helps in the long run. It alleviates power struggles and gives them a sense of control when you don't need to be in control. Instruction versus feedback. Instruction occurs before the task needs to be done, and that's when it's simple and direct. And the feedback occurs after, and then you can use more language with them then and give them praise. That's when it's good to show how proud of them you are and so forth. Task modification and accommodations. Making sure that the student can complete the task. And I don't know if it's been mentioned, but errorless teaching. A lot of the times they're just frustrated and it's overwhelming to them, so you just do errorless teaching. You basically are doing it for them in the beginning. And then you can back off and as they become more comfortable and you help them get it right, you break down the activity into steps. Providing supports and even different materials for the student to be successful. That's modifications and accommodations, but on modifications you may lower the reading level of what they're working on. It may be too hard for them. You may give them time demands. You may give them longer to finish the task. And then accommodations would be like larger print for a visually impaired student, maybe change their seating where they're sitting, extended time again, and maybe a break area, which we've already talked about that too. And then positive reinforcement is the big thing here, and it's a technique in which desired behaviors are increased through reinforcers. And you're reinforcing when the behavior you want occurs. So you're not bribing, you are reinforcing them when it occurs so they are understanding that. And Mrs. Lovelace talked about the 50% rule. If they can't sit for 10 minutes, that's when they start to have their meltdowns, then you break it down and you're reinforcing every 5 minutes. And the reinforcers can be whatever their preferred item is. It might be an iPad for a minute, it might be computer time or playing with a special toy, it might be an edible. So those change depending on the child. The day, the minute, the second, it just depends on the child. And they need to be motivating to the child. Teaching a new skill, scaffold learning, we're bridging those learning gaps and errorless teaching, and we're breaking down the activity into steps. And something that Tara, I don't know, you probably know Tara Warwick, Tara Audie, she's an Alva grad, and she's been a huge part of this for us, and she's helped me tremendously throughout all this for me. And one of the things she said is our goal is to fill their toolbox. You know, they only can do what they have in their toolbox, what they know to do. So our job is to do that. So anyway.
So as I begin my farewell speech, because I probably won't ever be asked back again, and that's okay. I'm okay with that, but thought I would begin my farewell speech with this, right? So, right? It's been long, I know. So I kept saying, I think I'll be finished by 20 minutes, but I totally lied to you. Sorry.
I don't think anybody was time.
Okay, I'm thinking he was back there, but that's okay. So here we are. What will we be doing in Alva soon? We talked about what we've done. Yay! And so we've got some great things going on. Program for specific students this year in June. 3 people from our district for free get to go to another internship at the Oklahoma Autism Center. And they will learn the Discreet Trials strategies, all of the strategies, but this is the cool part. The Oklahoma Autism Center people will now then come to Alva and work with our own babies and work with our kids and show us that we are making sure that we're doing all of the things that we learned in the internship correctly with our kids here in Alva, Oklahoma. So that gives me chill bumps. Then also, the other thing that we want to do with the Oklahoma Autism Center this summer is have a discovery camp for older kids. We've got some students who have autism that's older, and we want them to also be able to participate in something fun during the summer. And so they're going to help us put that on as well. We're going to also do an autism parent night. And then finally, we've got one more. I got a text 3 days ago, and Tara told us that we're working, it's looking good for year 3.
Yay!
So, you know, we're going to have to kind of negotiate that and kind of, you know, do some whatever. But if you do ever get the chance to just, without the Arenal Foundation grant, we wouldn't be able to facilitate any of these things. And I just think it's making it a better place for students who receive special education services here in Alva, Oklahoma. So after, like, oh my gosh, so long, do you guys have a question?
No, but I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
As a fellow educator, I'd like to thank you for your enthusiasm and your dedication. You just light up the room, and I appreciate you so much.
So y'all can go. I'm going to stay.
Positive reinforcement.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that was long.
That was good.
Sorry for anyone who has to.
They're students.
Come on up here. We'll let you leave. I feel like you're almost out the door.
How do you call that?
I don't know, good luck. I don't, it's gonna be hard to keep, can you positive reinforce this?
The rest
like
of
that.
this is just.
Not like that.
Not like that?
I promise you.
Well, that, we're blessed and fortunate.
Yes, we are. Thank you, Ms. Lovelace. That was great. It's very good. Thank you.
Items of current business. 6.1, discussion with possible board action, vote to approve Mary Tyree as an adjunct instructor for 1 hour of biology 1 for 2018-19 school year.
Okay, Miss Tyree, has a degree in science, and she is our teaching our physical science classes. And you can adjunct for 3 hours, and we did this earlier, and this kind of snuck up on us on our accreditation. She is teaching 1 hour of biology, and I would recommend that we approve her as an adjunct instructor for this year.
I'll make the motion that we approve 6-1.
A second.
Hanson,
Yes.
McDermott,
Aye.
Kane,
Yes.
Parker.
Yes.
6.2, discussion with possible board action, vote to approve the software service agreement with Municipal Accounting Systems Incorporated for the 2019-2020 school year.
In the past, this software system has been used just for our accounting purposes, payroll and so forth. And this year, we've actually been using this system also for our students and teachers. And so I would recommend that we approve this software service agreement with Municipal Accounting Systems.
I would make the motion that we continue that agreement.
Second.
McDermott,
Aye.
Parker,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
6.3, discussion with possible board action, vote to enter into a win-win negotiations with the Alva Education Association and the Alva Board of Education for fiscal year 20.
So this allows myself to begin the negotiations with the AEA. We will begin meeting just as soon as possible and begin working on that contract for FY20. I would recommend that we approve win-win negotiations.
I'll make the motion that we approve 6-4.
6-3, Coach.
6-3.
6-3.
I'll second that. 6-3.
Parker,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
McDermott.
Aye. 6.4, discussion with possible board action, vote to approve a resolution for schools and library universal services, the E-rate, for 2019-20. This resolution authorizes filing of the Form 471 applications for funding year 2019-20 and the payment of the applicant's share of approval, upon approval of funding and receipt of services.
I want to thank Ms. Poseidon for all her help in getting this application together. She has worked diligently with Kellogg and Sovereign, our E-rate service provider. We're going to be using this money to purchase some new access points. This is also part of our internet share and some other items for our technology. So I would recommend that we approve this E-rate resolution.
I'd make a motion that we approve the E-rate resolution.
Second.
Parker? Kane?
Yes.
McDermott?
Aye.
Hanson?
Yes.
6.5, discussion with possible board action, vote to renew employment of certified teachers listed on Exhibit A for the 2019-20 school year.
Okay, this is for our certified teachers. You can see that list. And I would recommend through the recommendation from our principals, they've done the correct observations and evaluations and walkthroughs of our teachers. And I would recommend that we approve this list, Exhibit A, of certified teachers for the 2019-2020 school year.
Make a motion, we approve 6.5. Second.
Kane?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
McDermott?
Aye.
Parker?
Yes.
6.6, discussion with possible board action, vote to employ the certified teachers listed on Exhibit B on a temporary contract for 2019-20 school year.
Okay, so this attachment B is our temporary teachers, and you're allowed by state law to employ certified teachers for 4 semesters, which is 2 years. And what we do this to allow us time to look at staffing each year. And by re-employing these folks again on a 1-year contract, that allows us to serve our students. I would make that recommendation.
I make a motion that we approve 6.6.
Second.
Hanson?
Yes.
McDermott?
Aye.
Parker?
Yes.
Kane?
Yes.
6.7, discussion with possible board action, vote to approve the license agreement with OKTLE for the 2019-20 school year.
The OKTLE is the instrument that is used for all of our observations, evaluations, and walkthroughs for teachers. And this next year, we will also be using this instrument for our administrators. So I would recommend that we approve the license agreement for the OKTLE for the 2019-20 school year.
I'd make the motion that we accept this.
Second.
Hanson?
Yes.
McDermott?
Aye.
Kane?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
6.8, discussion with possible board action, vote to approve the following board policies: BEA, BBB-P, and EIED.
Policy BEA is in regards to school board meeting agenda preparation and dissemination. This just requires that those that are interested be allowed to receive their agenda via email. And so we post that at the necessary time and meet those requirements. BBP is the filing board vacancies by the recommendation of the School Board Association. They ask that volunteer be removed from that policy and readopted. And then EIED are graduation requirements. And again, this is recommendation from the School Board Association. And what it did is it changed older language and updated that language to the newer language. So I would make the recommendation that we accept these 3 board policies. And thank Jane and Shane also for reviewing those and meeting with me this past week.
I would make the motion that we update all of those policies that were presented. Thank you.
Second.
Kane?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
McDermott?
Aye.
Hanson?
Yes.
8, proposed executive session to discuss the evaluation and employment of Tim Argo, superintendent, for 24 Oklahoma State Section 307B1. Evaluation topic: student services, school environment, supports, systems of support, student engagement, and relationships.
I make the motion we go to executive session.
Second.
McDermott?
Aye.
Parker?
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Haynes.
Yes. Thank you for coming.